Mr. Baker, we turn to you first. We're going to get to Ukraine in a moment, but I want to start with this report about the Postal Service. President Trump tried to get involved in his first term. Now here we are. It would have huge consequences, not just for those who say, well, the Postal Service has to tighten up their game. I got to send a package on a Sunday. It's more expensive than UPS. Explain to us how it could impact elections, because that could be a top reason why the president cares so much.
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, there's plenty of issues involving the Postal Service that many people think need to be addressed, but nobody, at least a lot of people, don't think that is what Donald Trump is really concerned about. What he is concerned about are a couple of things. One, Amazon uses the Postal Service to deliver packages, and he doesn't like the Washington Post coverage. And when he wanted to turn up the pressure on Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, he tried in his first term to go after the U.S. Postal Service and get them to raise rates on Amazon, a direct result of his displeasure at coverage by a news organization that he didn't like. So that's one thing. Secondly, of course, as you rightly just note, is the issue of mail-in ballots. He also, of course, was very interested in 2020 in the Postal Service's, role in delivering and securing ballots in elections, in which particularly elections he was a candidate in. And we thought that at the time that his appointees at the Postal Service might not necessarily be handling that with the alacrity and efficiency that the election demanded. And in the end, it seemed to work out relatively okay, but he's now coming back at the Postal Service once again, now that he has a second term and more power.
Peter, you know Russia well. You know how Putin operates. You spent years living in Moscow. Explain to our audience just how big of a change it is for America to appear or to publicly cozy up to Putin and continuously attack Zelensky like this.
Yeah, it's a huge change. I mean, look, obviously, presidents of both parties over the years have tried at times to negotiate or work with their Soviet or Russian counterparts, but that didn't mean that they treated them as if they were the heroes of an invasion of a neighboring country. That was never the case. Time again, Democrats and Republicans in the last 80 years condemned aggression by Moscow and at least gave rhetorical support to those who were, the victims of that aggression. Now you see a very different situation where Donald Trump is blaming the invasion of Ukraine on Ukraine. They're saying somehow that they were the ones who started the war, even though, of course, Russia attacked them. And it's a remarkable pivot for the United States. Why is he doing it? Well, one reason may be setting a predicate so that Americans who will look at whatever deal that Donald Trump strikes with Vladimir Putin will not see Ukraine in a sympathetic light. At least Trump supporters might not see Ukraine in a sympathetic light and be much more agreeable to a deal that seems to favor the Kremlin.
All right, Leanne, let's go to the Hill, because we just played those clips of John Thune a year ago compared to now. But he's not the only Republican hawk on the Hill. I feel like I'm ready to send tea with honey down to their offices. It seems like everybody's lost their voice.
Yeah, they have. No one wants to cross Donald Trump, especially as they say, look, let's see where this goes. Maybe this is just a negotiating tactic, even though Donald Trump is actively trying to rewrite history and something that's absolutely damaging to Ukraine. So Republicans are quite reluctant to say anything, even though many Republicans, some of them agree with the president and don't want to, of course, continue to fund the war in Ukraine. But for the most part, there is still a significant amount of Republicans, especially in the Senate, who do think that the survival of Ukraine and a very fair end to this war is absolutely crucial for NATO and for the Western alliance. Now, one thing, Senator Thom Tillis is one Republican who actually has spoken out. He didn't say a lot yesterday, but he gave a very fiery speech on the Senate floor today, and he told me that he's not going to stand by while this happens if the president continues to do it. But he's just one person as well. And I asked him how this is going to play out, what Congress can do to try to push back, how they are going to fund Ukraine, if they're going to at all. And he admitted that it's still a very open question.
Peter, let's talk NATO allies. We showed that Economist cover, the big table, Putin, Trump, and no one else. What are you hearing in terms of international reaction to all of this?
Well, obviously, the European allies are very distressed by this. They're distressed by the attacks on Zelensky and on Ukraine. They're distressed by the cozying up to Putin. And they're distressed on the attacks that Trump has mounted against them, the traditional allies of the United States going back generations. He has, in the month he's been back in office, threatened tariffs. He has harangued them over their military spending. He has seemingly threatened to hollow out NATO in a way that is very distressing. And you see Macron, President Macron of France, trying to gather European leaders together because they realize that they may need to find their own way without being able to rely on the United States. And that's a big change. You saw J.D. Vance saying at the Munich Security Conference a few days ago that the biggest threat is not Russia, it's not China, it's internal issues within Europe, because, in fact, extremist parties like Alternatives for Germany, which is considered on the far right there, have been, not given enough credence and credibility by the governing elites. So you can see from that speech, you can see from Trump's comments, you can see from Trump's approach to these Russia negotiations without any Europeans at the table, a NATO that seems to be, fraying once again.